In the depths of Japanese winter, where most would freeze even in modern coats, monks have long sat motionless in thin cotton robes, and not just survived, but found deep peace. Their secret turned the bitter cold into a tool, not an enemy. What was discovered on Mount Omin and passed down from Enno Gyoja, founder of Shugendo, defies scientific logic. Entire winters were endured with almost nothing. But was this resilience the result of ancient legend, radical philosophy, or untapped human biology? The real story begins with hardship, embraced, not avoided. To the yamabushi, the cold was never just a season to be endured. It was a deliberate invitation, a test set by the mountains themselves. They called it shugyo, a word that means more than simple training. Shugyo is the forging of the self through hardship, a discipline that strips away comfort, pride, and even the illusion of separation from the natural world. In the depths of winter, when the wind scours the slopes of Mount Omin and snow buries the old pilgrimage trails, monks sought out the harshest conditions, not to escape suffering, but to meet it head-on, to let it burn away the layers of ego that shield the mind from its own raw experience. Enno Gyoja, the legendary founder of Shugendo, is said to have retreated into the mountains in the 7th century, living on pine needles and spring water, seeking visions and power not in comfort, but in relentless exposure to the elements. His followers, the yamabushi, inherited this ethos. The mountain was both teacher and crucible. To walk barefoot through snow, to stand under icy waterfalls, to spend nights in unheated huts, these were not punishments, but pathways. Each trial was a chance to encounter the limits of the body and, in doing so, discover that those limits could be moved. Shugyo demanded more than physical strength. It was a spiritual contract, to surrender the need for control, to let the cold dismantle the self until only awareness remained. Monks believed that only by facing the greatest discomfort could they dissolve the boundaries between themselves and the mountain, between self and nature. In this way, hardship became a kind of purification. The cold was not an adversary, but a mirror, reflecting back every weakness, every attachment. To endure was not the goal. Transformation was. Through Shugyo, the monks found that what most people call suffering could become the very ground of awakening. In 1872, a government edict swept through Japan, ordering the outright ban of Shugendo and the dissolution of its temples. Official proclamations labeled the mountain ascetics as relics of superstition. Monasteries on Mount Omini and the Diwa-sanzan were seized or repurposed, their archives scattered, and their rituals forced underground. The yamabushi, once visible in their white robes along snowbound trails, became nearly invisible to the public eye. Arrests at Kinpusenji Temple and confiscations of sacred implements left entire lineages without a home. Yet the practices did not vanish. Instead, they retreated into the fabric of family memory and secret gatherings. Surviving yamabushi adapted, disguising their mountain pilgrimages as local Shinto rites or household ceremonies. In the absence of written manuals, oral tradition became the lifeline. Stories and techniques passed quietly from mentor to disciple, often at night, always with the understanding that the mountain's true lessons could not be written down. Fragments of this hidden world survive in unexpected places. Edo period emakimono, Picture scrolls now preserved in the Tokyo and Nara National Museums depict monks braving winter waterfalls, their breath rising in clouds against the snow. Pilgrimage registers and Nokyocho books stamped with the seals of ancient temples record entries for winter ascents long after the ban. These visual records, now digitized by research centers like Nichibunken, serve as rare windows into a nearly erased tradition. Modern scientists, searching for evidence of these feats, have turned to both the archives and the body. They note that adult humans retain about 50 grams of brown adipose tissue, BAT, capable of generating heat in the cold. Recent studies show that repeated exposure can increase BAT activity by over a third, hinting at a physiological pathway for what the monks described as inner fire. But with so many records lost or hidden, each new discovery relies on careful reconstruction, piecing together the scattered traces left by a tradition that refused to die. A monk kneels in the snow, hands resting lightly on his thighs, eyes half closed. The breath begins not in the chest, but deep in the belly, in what the yamabushi call the hara, just below the navel. Inhale slowly through the nose, drawing the air downward, feeling the abdomen expand like a bellows. Then exhale, letting the breath leave naturally, without force. Each cycle is deliberate, unhurried, and rooted in the body's core. Tradition holds that 30 of these deep abdominal breaths form a single round. After the last inhale, the breath is held, not strained, but gently suspended, while the mind remains focused on the warmth gathering in the hara. Some lineages teach a silent mnemonic, a rhythmic chant passed from teacher to disciple. In with the mountain, out with the river. This sequence is never written down. It is learned by watching, by listening, by feeling the subtle shift as cold air moves through the body and is transformed. The cycle is repeated, sometimes for several rounds, always under the watchful eye of a senior practitioner. In the coldest months, monks gather before dawn to practice together, their breath rising in clouds, the only sound, the steady rhythm of inhales and exhales. Oral tradition warns against excess. Never push past dizziness. Never practice alone in dangerous conditions. The breath is both shield and furnace, but it demands respect. Modern science recognizes the effects of such breathing. Deep abdominal cycles can alter blood chemistry, raise adrenaline, and steady the mind. Yet for the yamabushi, the purpose is not to chase sensation or test limits, but to harmonize with the mountain itself. Each breath is a vow of presence, a way to meet the cold not with resistance but with quiet power. In this practice, the line between body and winter air begins to blur. The monk remains motionless in the snow, warmed from within by nothing more than breath and intent. Historical techniques replicate only under supervision. This is not medical advice. Deep rhythmic breathing does more than calm the mind. It transforms the body's chemistry. Each cycle of kokyu-ho draws air deep into the belly, then releases it with measured control. This deliberate pattern has measurable effects. Blood pH rises, shifting toward alkalinity, a change of about 0.15 on the scale. That subtle adjustment is enough to alter how the body handles stress and cold. As the breath quickens and deepens, the adrenal glands respond. Adrenaline surges through the bloodstream, not in a trickle, but in a wave 2 to 3 times greater than baseline. This is the same hormone that fuels a fight-or-flight response, but here, It is summoned by choice, not by fear. The body's metabolism accelerates, generating heat from within. In laboratory settings, this effect has been confirmed. A landmark study led by Matthias Cox in 2014 placed trained breath practitioners under close observation. With nothing but their own breath and focus, they voluntarily activated the sympathetic nervous system, something once thought impossible. Their adrenaline levels spiked and their bodies resisted cold and even inflammation more effectively than controls. Blood samples revealed a cascade of catecholamines, echoing the stress response, but without panic or distress. Physiologists now recognize that these breathing techniques can create a biological furnace, stoking internal heat and shifting the body into a state of readiness. Yet this power comes with risk. The same mechanisms that drive up adrenaline and alkalinity can, if misapplied, lead to dizziness, fainting, or worse. Monastic tradition insists on supervision and restraint. Never practice alone. Never push past the body's warnings. The science does not diminish the mystery. Instead, it confirms that through breath, the yamabushi could shape their own physiology, blurring the line between mind and body. Their warmth in winter was not imagined. It was measured in blood, in hormones, in the silent steadiness of a monk sitting in snow, unmoved by the cold. Functional MRI scans reveal a striking pattern in the brains of long-term meditators. As they settle into deep zazen, activity in the default mode network, the web of regions responsible for self-referential thought and mental chatter, drops by 40% to 65%. This network, most active when the mind drifts or fixates on discomfort, quiets down in the midst of focused meditation. The sensation of cold remains, but the usual cascade of thoughts, complaints, worries, the urge to escape, loses its grip. The mind neither resists nor clings, it simply observes. Neuroscientist Judson Brewer, whose team first measured this effect in experienced monks, describes it as a kind of neural silence. When the default mode network dims, the brain's response to pain and distress also weakens. The insula and amygdala, centers for emotional reaction, settle into calm. For the yamabushi, this is not an abstract state but a lived experience. The cold is still there, but the suffering attached to it dissolves. The body can then redirect its energy, maintaining steady breath and posture without the drain of panic or resistance. This measurable shift is more than a curiosity. It suggests that the monk's legendary endurance is not a trick of willpower, but a real transformation in how the brain processes hardship. The mountain's cold does not disappear, but the mind's story about it fades into the background. In this space, the possibility of enduring becomes real, not through denial, but through a profound change in perception. On a January morning, just before sunrise, a yamabushi sits cross-legged on a frozen riverbank. Wind needles his skin, but his posture is still, his gaze unfocused. A villager once described watching this ritual from a distance, expecting to see trembling or teeth chattering. Instead, the monk's breath comes slow and steady, clouds rising in even intervals. Minutes pass. Snow gathers on his shoulders. He does not brush it away. The mind, trained through years of zazen, does not leap to judgment or complaint. In this state, mushin or no mind, the usual reflexes fade. Cold remains a sensation, but it no longer commands the body's attention. Field notes from winter retreats on Mount Omin record how this mental quiet changes behavior. Monks do not flinch from icy water or shuffle for warmth. They move deliberately, conserving energy. During Taki Gyo, standing beneath waterfalls at sub-zero temperatures, they focus not on escape, but on each breath, each drop against the skin. One observer in the 1980s described a senior practitioner who, after emerging from the waterfall, calmly wrung out his robe and sat in the snow to dry, eyes half closed, lips moving in silent recitation. The cold, he explained later, was only a visitor. The mind's refusal to react gave the body space to endure. This discipline is not about suppressing pain or pretending the cold does not exist. Instead, it is a practiced non-reactivity, a way of letting the world's harshness flow through without leaving a mark. In the absence of panic, the body's resources gather at the center, the harai, ready for the next challenge. The monk's warmth is not a shield, but a quiet ember, sustained by the mind's unwavering focus. In the 9th century, a Buddhist monk named Kukai, later known as Kobo Daishi, returned from China with more than scriptures and rituals. He carried with him the seeds of esoteric practice that would take root in Japan's mountains, shaping the very way monks understood their bodies and minds in the face of hardship. Kukai taught that the true source of endurance was not muscle or willpower, but the cultivation of energy at the body's center, the hara, just below the navel. In Shingon doctrine, this point is more than anatomy. It is the wellspring of ki, the vital force that animates all things. Ancient mandalas, preserved in temple archives, map the cosmos onto the human body, placing a hidden fire at this core. For centuries, Shingon monks sat in meditation halls on Mount Koya, visualizing this center as a glowing ember, fanned by each breath, steady even as winter storms raged outside. The influence of Kukai's teachings spread beyond Shingon, shaping the culture of mountain ascetics across Japan. Yamabushi, though distinct from Shingon monks, adopted this focus on the hara as the foundation of their own winter austerities. Lineage scrolls and oral instructions describe the hara as the anchor in both physical and spiritual storms, a place to gather breath, intention, and resilience. The practice was not just about surviving the cold, but about aligning the self with the deep patterns of nature, as outlined in esoteric diagrams and chanted in mantras passed from teacher to disciple. In this way, the doctrine of inner fire, rooted in Kukai's vision, became a living thread, connecting centuries of monks who faced the mountain's chill with little more than faith, breath, and a quiet center of warmth. On the slopes of Mount Haguro, as the first snow seals the mountain from the outside world, two yamabushi step into a tradition that has survived centuries of secrecy and suppression. Each winter, the Fuyu no Mine retreat begins, 100 days of near-total seclusion, observed not as a spectacle, but as living discipline. The doors close behind them in late autumn. For the next 3 months, the outside world recedes to a memory of wind and distant bells. Their days are measured by the cold and by ritual. They rise before dawn, sometimes as early as 2 in the morning, and move through cycles of chanting, fire ceremonies, and silent meditation in unheated wooden halls. The only warmth comes from within. Meals are sparse, a bowl of rice, pickles, perhaps a few winter vegetables. There is no comfort food, no extra fuel, just enough to sustain the body, never enough to dull the mind. Sleep is brief, broken by the demands of midnight sutras and pre-dawn ablutions. The cold is constant, settling into the bones, frosting the breath, turning every movement into a deliberate act. According to those who have completed the retreat, something remarkable happens after the first weeks. The body begins to adapt. Practitioners describe a sensation of heat gathering in the lower belly, a quiet ember that endures even when fingers and toes go numb. While there are stories of abdominal warmth rising by a degree or two, no scientist has yet measured it in these halls. What is certain is the change in perception. The cold becomes less an enemy, more a companion. The mind, sharpened by hunger and repetition, grows still. In this state, the yamabushi say, the boundaries between self and mountain blur, and the retreat is no longer a test, but a communion. The Fuyu no Mine is not open to outsiders. Its details are preserved in oral memory, and the silent endurance of those who return each spring, changed in ways that cannot be written down. The mountain keeps its secrets, but every winter the practice continues, living proof that the old ways have not faded, even as the world outside grows ever more distant from the cold. As modern science rediscovers ancient resilience, the line between myth and method grows thinner. Our world grows colder in climate, in pace, in spirit, yet the research is clear. The capacity to generate warmth, both physical and mental, remains within us all. In an age of comfort, the greatest frontier is still the mind. What will you choose to endure?